Hi, I'm Barat. Welcome to my video. In general, when it comes to influencing people, it is about talking more, expressing yourself more. The suggestions given are from this side, but today I want to say a little bit the opposite. How can you influence other people by staying silent, by standing back? I believe very much that when you position yourself, not by talking more, positioning yourself at points where you sometimes have to stand back, sometimes you have to refuse, it is possible to become a more respectable, more powerful, and a completely different charismatic person in the eyes of other people. Let's start if you are ready. First of all, your body language is very important in such moments of crisis. Let's say there is a tense moment. You are arguing with someone, you are somehow in the middle of a crisis that you don't want. In such a situation, are your bodily movements like fluttering? Are you moving too much? Are you in a panic too much? If you are like this, even if you are an expert in that subject, even if you are completely right, people start to see you as a novice. In any case, moving a little slower in such a situation, sitting down and thinking calmly before reacting, moving a little slower gives a message to other people. I am an expert in this subject. I am acting confidently right now, and even if you don't know what to do at that moment, this slow moving issue somehow buys you time, and then you can make more logical and cooler decisions. So instead of panicking like this, like you're fluttering, just put your hands on the table, be a little bit slower, think a little bit more, act a little bit more slowly, calmly, and other people will have more respect for that. We all want other people to notice the good things that we have in life. So no matter how much you deny it, if you dress well, if your choices are tasteful, if you have a success, if you have acquired property, if you have put forward a really good idea in a situation, you want these things to be noticed. In such situations, one should not make the mistake that one should do less self-promotion. In such a situation, it would be much more effective if you tell yourself about yourself with a little more behavioral messages such as your preferences, your taste in clothing, what you do, your work, your power, instead of telling about your successes and good things. If you are in a job interview, this may be necessary, but other than that, I think it is much more effective to express yourself in a more indirect way, to advertise your achievements in such a secret way. On the one hand, it is important here sometimes, for example, if your achievements need to be told at some point, let a friend do it, not you. It will be much more effective when someone else tells you. By the way, as long as you don't say nice things about yourself, I mean, in a way, you are expressing it indirectly, but you will make people more curious, and people listen to things they are curious about with more importance. When they are curious about things about you and they are forced to take it from you like this, they will show much more respect for the information they have learned, and they may attribute to you perhaps even more respect than you deserve. If you want to influence other people with silence, basically, you have to be careful about everything you say. Sometimes we feel like talking too much, we feel like telling too much. Yes, you can do that in an environment of trouble, in an environment of intimate friends. You can do that. You can talk as you feel like talking, but if you are in a social environment, if you are with people you have just met, I think it will be very important for you to ask yourself these three questions before you talk about something. Does this need to be said? Does this need to be said now? Does this need to be said by me? If you apply this filter to your speech, you will prevent what we call a little bit more idle talk at this point. Empty talkers usually have an effort like this. Notice me, value me. This is a perception of neediness. If you have a comment on everything, if you jump into everything, if you talk about everything, you are inevitably perceived by other people as an empty talker, and you can be seen as an empty can. This one talks about everything, but when you hold back a little bit, even if you don't have any knowledge on the subject, people have an interesting perspective. They think you have knowledge about the subject you don't talk about. I can say that this is also a white manipulation tactic. Even if you are an expert on a subject, don't put forward your ideas unless the other party asks you for a suggestion. Now, in such a situation, but you can say, what's the matter? You give your ideas when the other party doesn't ask for a suggestion or the other party doesn't value it very much. Maybe you think of the benefit of that person in yourself, but unfortunately there is such a rule in human relations. If you say something without the other party asking for it, you fall to the point of such a person who gives advice, gives suggestions. Unfortunately, no one listens to people who give advice, unless someone asks you for something, and think of it like this. You are an expert on a subject. Every piece of information you have on that subject is a jewel. You shouldn't throw it around like this, so that the people around you don't forget that you have knowledge and how special your experiences are, but if you throw it around, they will say, oh my God, what is he talking about? You are trying to benefit. But unfortunately, you can be perceived like this. In today's world, there are oppositional types in some environments. In fact, he doesn't have an opinion on the subject, but you tell something. and he immediately opposes you there. So it's not a very meaningful exit. But in such cases, people who feel a little more insecure feel like they have to answer every criticism, regardless of whether what the other party says is important or not. Look at the other party. Does what he said require an answer? In such situations, you can say you are right, or sometimes you can say nothing and step back. You can laugh with such a tiny smile, that is, you step back at that moment. If someone is trying to attack you from such a meaningless place, defending yourself is his pull. In such situations, in some tense dialogues, in tense environments, you can play with your body. You can avoid eye contact. You can look at the ceiling, the window, the floor. If you want to impress the other side, it is important that you do not miss eye contact as much as possible. I think this is also the case in a personal conflict, but missing eye contact does not mean looking at the other person in the eye all the time, as if you are threatening them. You should look at them from time to time, but you should not go to the point of looking away for good. Also, for example, there is what I said at the beginning. In such tense situations, instead of being overly active, if you change your body language less, if you change your position very little, if you stand at a more fixed point, this will also be a way to give the other party the message that you are confident. Have an effort to tell something to the people around us. I think we need to keep this effort to a certain extent. There is a trap that we always fall into, the trap of over-explaining. Now you can think of a graph like this. I have an argument. I have an idea that I believe in. You want to impose it on the other side. You want to make them believe. Now at this point, the things that you tell at first start to affect the other side for a certain period of time, but when you fall into the trap of over-explaining, over-talking, you know what happens? Your credibility starts to decline. It's even called the fire effect. Over-explaining is one of the things that shakes the other side's trust in you. It is very important to be as succinct and emotional as possible in such things. Before talking to someone, it is more effective for many people to convince the other person's logic to mobilize emotions rather than trying to explain something in great detail with unnecessary jargon. You should explain it to him as simply as possible. Step back and give him some time to perceive it. But if you fall into the trap of over-explaining, it can affect you negatively, as I said. In general, if you are in a situation where someone asks you for an opinion on something you don't know, and you start talking about something you don't know, because you might be thinking, if I say I don't know, they will see me in a worse, inferior position, when in fact it's the opposite. When you talk about something I don't know in a situation, you are talking nonsense. You are talking in general terms. Let's say one time nothing happens, but if you do it all the time, then people will say either he's a liar, but he'll tell you. But if you don't know something, I think it's very useful to say I don't know and step back. You can say, I can learn from you in a quieter, calmer way, and you can start listening to him. And here is one of the most important methods of influencing people by staying silent. We usually think that we will influence people more by talking, but on the contrary, if we put the spotlight on him, if we turn it on him, if we listen to the good aspects of the other person and give him the opportunity to explain himself, people are much more satisfied with that relationship. So when we somehow pull ourselves back and shine the spotlight on the other person, that person leaves that relationship much more satisfied. And finally, I would like to say this, my friend, don't tell anyone too much about your dreams. There are two reasons for this. First of all, when you talk about your dreams too much, you are satisfied when you talk about them, and when it comes to the execution part, your motivation decreases. There is such a reality. Another issue is that you tell people about your projects. Maybe you realize 2 out of 10 projects, you are positioned in the eyes of people as a person who promises a lot and says that he will do a lot, but does little. But if you talk a lot and do little, it's always like this. As I said, a little negative impact can create a negative impression. I want to ask you something like this. Do you think it makes sense to do such tactics to impress other people a little bit? Is it right? How do you think about this? Or for example, if we are a person who talks a lot no matter what, if it is in our nature to talk a lot of nonsense, should we never change this? I think it is actually a little bit necessary to make tactics. In some situations, we should do it in more natural ways, without turning our own personality into something completely different. I am curious about your opinion on this subject. Thank you for listening to me.